Hello, I'm Art del Cueto, representing the Federation for American Immigration Reform. And today I'm very excited to have Congressman Eli Crane. He represents Arizona's 2nd District. And I'll tell you what, it's exciting to have him on, not just because it's my home state, not just because I've known him for a long time, but I think it's somebody that I can consider and have called a friend long before he even decided to join Congress. So it is a huge pleasure of mine to have Eli Crane, Congressman Eli Crane, with me today.
Thank you, brother. It's
Thanks
great
for
to be with
being
you.
on. So, Congressman Crane, it's your second time running through this. What's the difference from being a congressman, a junior congressman, to now your second term through?
Well, I think there's, some differences, but, honestly, you're still trying to learn a lot of the lingo, a lot of the process, and even many of the members, it's kind of like joining the military where you have to learn a bunch of acronyms and,
Right.
So you just have a little bit more knowledge. You usually get bumped up a little bit higher seniority in your committees, but a lot's still the same. You're still a new guy.
So you do still consider yourself the new guy here?
Yeah, and Art, when I was in the Navy, I felt like it took me probably, a couple deployments before I felt like a solid operator, and I feel the same way here. There's just so much to learn, and I think humility is a really important part of the piece up here. You see a lot of folks that come up here and think they're a big shot and are all arrogant. We could fill warehouses with the things I still don't know. I just know that this country's in trouble, and I wanted to come up here and serve.
And I think that's what makes a big difference, because you're right. You have individuals that have been lifelong in politics, and they know the different ins and outs of the politics. They know the lingo, as you can say, right?
Yeah.
But as someone that you're from Arizona, you've seen the border issues that have happened for many, many decades.
Yeah.
And yes, you're newer. You're trying to learn the lingo. You come up here. It's all new to you. But at the same time, you have that piece that's ahead of the game from others because you've seen it. And I know that you have gone out and toured areas of the border, even before you even decided to run for office. So is that difficult at the same time as being newer to Congress, yet having the border knowledge that I know a lot of other people in Congress don't have?
Yeah, well, I think it's an advantage in many ways, and that's actually where I first met you. I was disappointed to see that you were wearing Crocs instead of your cowboy boots.
That's right.
You were also carrying a Glock pistol, which I didn't approve of.
It was a bad beginning.
Yeah,
let's just say.
Yeah, but no, it's great in many ways because I got put on the Homeland Security Committee.
Right.
It was one of the my top committees that I wanted to be on, and we just know firsthand how important border security is in Arizona. Everything, comes through just a couple states and then flows into the rest of the country. And so having some of the friendships and relationships that I have, which gave me access to the border, statistics, data, what the cartels were doing, definitely gave, me an upper hand on just what was going on and trying to help guide and direct some of the policies in DC to combat and deal with, that threat.
Right. So with that and seeing those threats and knowing that they were there, and the drug cartels and everything else, obviously it's been frustrating, right, for several years. Do you see it now moving in the right direction? I know there's orders that have been done. I like to say the handcuffs have been taken off of law enforcement, specifically on the border. Do you see? Are you hearing it? I mean, we live in the same community, right? So I guess it's kind of weird asking you, because you listen to the people that I listen to. But do people come up to you and they say, "Hey, look, things are getting better, and we're seeing a difference"? When you go down to Arizona.
Absolutely, and it happened so quickly. And there are people in Washington last cycle who, said we need to back this bill, we need to back that. But what I believed and what I saw, Art, was that we just needed leadership that actually cared about the issue, and was willing to do what needed to be done. And, some of the people that have been put in place to deal with this issue are very serious people. They're willing to take all sorts of political slings and arrows. They're willing to get beat up in the media constantly. And I think that that's a big part of the difference. And as, this administration has done that, I think you've seen a trickle down effect to many of the agents. You talked about taking the handcuffs off. As I talk to agents, they seem to be have a lot more job satisfaction, feel like they're finally able to do their job again, feel like they're not being tied up, processing people into the country and actually being able to keep drugs, individuals on the terror watch list, gangsters out of the country. And, we're working on right now this reconciliation package, which is going to be huge for not only CBP, the Border Patrol, but so many of the other agencies that deal with, the border defense issue. I mean, I think it's close to, I think, $150 billion that we're going to be allocating to that issue. So not only have we seen it quickly turn around, but I think with the moves that we're making and the resources that we're allocating, you're going to see our border probably more secure than it's been in decades, and that has the potential to have long-lasting effects as well.
No, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I talk to people all the time, and we go back and forth on the issues. You can have different executive orders, which I think are helpful. And as you said, you see the numbers drop in one day, right?
Yep.
I've been out in the field and I saw the numbers go up in one day. I see them go down in one day.
Right.
So we see that effect. Obviously, the reconciliation deal is big. Because it helps and assists the agents moving forward, equipment and everything else that you can think of. And some of it is long-lasting equipment, right? So if you put certain sensors or towers and cameras and build different areas of the wall, that's something that's going to continue to be there for several decades, hopefully.
Yeah.
But at the same time, moving forward, do you see any way that there can be some actual bills that could fix the immigration process and the immigration problem as a whole? Because look, the detaining them is great. The numbers are going down. Now we're having to remove those that were here and that have remained here and pretty much circumvented our laws or laughed at our laws and decided not to show up to court. Do you see a path moving forward to be able to I guess make it easier for those that actually have a real claim to asylum or any type of immigration moving forward?
Yeah, I do. But, to go back to the 30,000-foot view, I think that before that serious discussion takes place, step one had to happen, and that
Right.
was to secure the border. There's already, conversations up here about, bringing on more immigration judges and funding that process to actually make sure that we have enough bodies and people who can make decisions on who has a legitimate, asylum, claim and whatnot. And to your point, Art, we often get branded as the party that's anti-immigration, and that's not true at all. Some of the best people I've met in my life have immigrated here, but the key is, Art, they did it legally. They went through the process. They didn't skip the line. And as you know, that's a long process. I think there is the potential for, that process to get better. But that's what many of us want to see. Not only do we want to see people, especially the most violent individuals, not only do we want to see them get deported, but we want to see people being willing to go through the process, assimilate to our country, and show the respect of not just, jumping the line, walking over the border, and thinking to yourself, well, I got a foot over the border. I'm a citizen now, and I can collect
Right.
all sorts of benefits from the hardworking, taxpayers in this country.
And we need to find the right path moving forward on how to get things done correctly. And part of that right path is, like as you said, is making sure that you have the right structure down on the border to assist Border Patrol, to assist law enforcement. There's many things that need to be done. Now we're seeing even the deployment of the military. As someone that's was in the military, do you see that as a big advantage, or do you also at the same time see it as a way that maybe they're going to target the military in a wrongful way as well?
I think it is an advantage because when you come from a military background, especially one like I do, you're trained to think in the terms of, if I wanted to get through this border, how would I do it? How could I do it? And one of the things that is so obvious now is, because we've done such a good job at flooding resources to the border crossings are down to a pretty amazing level. The cartels, aren't just going to pack it up and say, hey, we're willing to walk away from this, multi-billion-dollar operation. So they're going to adapt just like an enemy would overseas. You're seeing them start to implement drones into their process. I believe, we're going to see an increase in tunnels as well. Matter of fact, just yesterday morning, I had the Israeli guys in my office that are in charge of counter tunnel operations in Israel, to listen and learn about what they're doing, what their best practices are, what technology they're using, and also had a conversation with, one of the congressional liaisons from the Border Patrol yesterday afternoon after that conversation about, to see if I could get any current reporting on whether or not they're seeing increased activity. And so I think being from the military, in many ways helps you really think through some of the problem sets. Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful that we have several other veterans on the committee as well, the Homeland Security Committee. The chairman himself is a veteran.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that I think that really helps. How do you see the reconciliation package moving forward at this point? I mean, I know it's been nonstop.
Well,
but how do you think it's going to plan out?
Honestly, it's understandable in a way. Anytime, for anybody that knows and understands Congress, you have all these different factions, right? And all these different groups have different priorities. And anytime you're working under the paradigm of one big, beautiful bill, that complicates things even further. And so everybody's trying to get everything they want into this one big, beautiful bill. I think we're making progress and moving in the right direction. It doesn't mean there haven't been speed bumps or there won't be any more speed bumps, but I think most Republicans are united under trying to get President Trump's agenda across the finish line. And the great thing about reconciliation, Art, is that it allows us to bypass the Senate filibuster. We don't need 60 votes in the Senate. We just need a simple majority. And that's why there's so much pressure on this process. This is the best process for us to get the president's agenda across the finish line. And obviously there's some conflicts on codifying into law things that many of us believe will be detrimental to the president's agenda, but also, continue to perpetuate some of just the out of control federal spending in Washington, which, talking about threats, in my opinion, that is the biggest threat up here. And not a lot of people in the Beltway think about it or even want to think about it. But when you're running, close to $37 trillion in debt, $2 trillion annual deficits, that this ship is headed off a fiscal cliff. And some of us are trying to turn the wheel to buy us more time and try and get our fiscal house in order. And there's many people up here that could care less.
No, and I've spoken to you about it many times before, and I think that's what people need to understand about Eli Crane, is that you sometimes don't make the most popular decisions with the crowd, right?
That's right. That's right.
I think I've called you a couple of times and I said, Eli, what are you doing?
That's right.
And you've explained it. I said, look, Art, this is where I'm at and this is why I feel this way. So I think you're somebody that's been up here for now your second term.
Yeah.
But your moral compass hasn't changed.
Right.
And I think that's important for people to know. How do you see us moving forward? Obviously, we have things going in the right direction.
Yeah.
But we need to make sure that the proper bills are done. Do you see we keeping it this way, keeping it steady? Because obviously there's a lot of people out there that are nervous. Just like the numbers went down. You can have an election and the numbers go back up in the wrong way. And it's like you said, you have a lot of individuals with criminal backgrounds that have entered the country, the gotaways. Yeah. You're from Arizona. Arizona, for the longest time, they're the state that has had the highest level of gotaways.
Yeah.
Now we have the military. Now things are going good. The numbers are down. What do you see moving forward?
Like I said, Art, I do believe that this bill will get across the finish line. I think there are still negotiations going on as we speak. And like I said, I do believe that we'll get the money for Border Patrol and border security across the finish line. I do think we'll get the extra money for the Department of Defense so that Secretary Hegseth can deal with all of the tasks that the president has given him and make sure that our military men and women are ready to face whatever conflict they face around the world. I do believe that there will be some fiscal cuts in there. I think which will be good. So I think that this thing is headed in the right direction. There's a lot of very pro-energy stuff in this bill. That was something that the president ran on. Kind of an all of the above approach
Right.
instead of prioritizing renewable green energy like wind and solar. And this administration isn't anti-wind and solar or renewable
Right.
energy. They just take an all of the above approach. They like nuclear, they like coal, and a lot of these folks, the environmentalist types, and your folks on the other side of the aisle that are pushing more of a green new agenda, I don't think they've done the math on how rapidly the economy is growing, especially with the introduction of AI and how much energy some of these data centers take. And I don't think that I think that if we continue on the energy course that we're going on, you're going to see the U.S. become more like some of the European countries right now that are experiencing blackouts because they push towards energy sources that don't work all the time and are a lot more expensive. And so, this administration, I think, has done a great job putting together policy, but right now they're having to deal with all these different factions that are, have different priorities, and it does take time. There's over 500 people up here. There's probably, within the House and the Senate,
Right.
and there's so many different groups that are trying to get on the same page so that we can execute for the president and the American people.
And that's going to be the overwhelming part. You came in here, and I think you're doing a fantastic job, and you're going to continue to do a great job. But I think that's got to be the overwhelming and tough part. Is you came in knowing what your constituents wanted, knowing what needed to be done, but then you have to deal with a whole bunch of other individuals that have a different idea on a lot of other things. So I think what made it difficult. Eli, what do you want people to know about you? Wrapping it up. I mean, I know a lot about you, right? You're centered. Your whole focus, and you've been very much centered in Jesus and God.
Yeah.
I know I've seen that many times. I know we go to the same church.
Yeah.
You have a lovely family. You gun enthusiast, jiu-jitsu and motorcycle and everything else. And now I heard a new proud Croc owner, because I heard you wear Crocs now, thanks to a friend of ours in Congress.
Yeah.
What do you want to tell the American public that you want them to know about you and realize what you really are doing out here?
Yeah, I would just say to the folks watching this, continue to pray for our leaders up here. We definitely need the prayer. We need the wisdom. Don't ever put, and I'm sure I'm telling you guys something you already know, don't ever put your faith in politicians.
That's right.
Keep your faith in, the Almighty, and something that doesn't twist and turn with culture. And, just continue to be engaged, be informed. Art, that's one of the biggest problems up here. And it's why a lot of the same people keep getting sent back up here that, in my opinion, are more focused on their political career and trajectory than they are in saving the country, because a lot of American people don't pay attention and they don't research for themselves. And so continue to, self-educate yourself, and hopefully we'll get some people up here that are more willing to do the right thing when it might cost them and put themselves in political jeopardy. That's really all I got, man.
I think that's
hold on. Don't interrupt
What
me,
you
Art.
got? What you got?
No, I was just gonna say, dude, I appreciate, I know you've been in the Border Patrol for a long time, fighting this fight, and you know, I know that there's been times of feast and famine for you guys, and you know, we appreciate, you know, what you guys do. We really do, because we know it's not an easy job. We know sometimes, you know, the media and folks turn on our border patrol agents, and other law enforcement agents, and there's many of us up here that, you know, not only have your back but really support and appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Eli. With those words, I'll tell you what really resonates out of everything that we've always talked about a lot of issues, and you saying, you know, there's a lot of people out there that put up front their political career and not necessarily the best of the country, and I think that's in a lot of fields and a lot of agencies and a lot of departments.
Yeah.
And those words alone, I think the American public needs to really pay attention to that, because those that's very sound and wise advice. Once again, I want to thank Congressman Crane for being on here today. And, you know, on behalf of the Federation for American Immigration Reform, keep watching. We'll have more updates, more news, because you deserve to be informed.